This is by far the best piece of camera gear you can own as a beginning filmmaker or content creator. Let me tell you why. The DJI Osmo Pocket 3, a tiny gimbal-controlled camera capable of shooting 4K video and all the popular frame rates, and so much more. How does this funny-looking camera provide the foundation for your journey into the high-tech realm of filmmaking and content creating? Let's break it down, starting with... First off, the Pocket 3 offers a Pro mode that allows you to manually set your resolution, frame rate, shutter speed, ISO, and even the aspect ratio. It shoots in 4K resolution at all the popular frame rates, including the most highly used 24 frames per second for producing the most lifelike results and realistic motion blur. Also on the list of popular frame rates, we have 60 frames per second, allowing you to slow down your footage and post for some nice smooth B-roll or a dramatic sequence. And if that's not enough, we can slow it down even more by selecting 4K 120 frames per second, perfect for getting even smoother results during fast-paced events. I've provided detailed instructions on how to use all the amazing features of the Pocket 3 at the end of this video, so feel free to jump ahead if you have any questions on any certain features. Since we're shooting in the great digital outdoors, most of the time it's too bright to set our shutter speed to 1/50 and get the realistic motion from the 24 frames per second, unless we have an ND filter blocking out some of the harsh sunlight. This brings us to our next category. Pocket 3 doesn't have the option of swapping out lens like a full-size camera would, but what it does offer is this wide-angle lens attachment that brings a 20mm equivalent down to a 15mm focal length. In addition to the wide-angle lens attachment, DJI released a black mist filter to give your footage a more cinematic feel right out of the camera, along with a whole set of magnetic ND filters. Be on the lookout because there's already a bunch of third-party lens attachments available for this camera. For content creators, your aspect ratio is probably going to be changing on a daily basis. While the standard aspect ratio for video is normally 16:9, the rise of short-form content or vertical content is in high demand. A shooting ratio of 1:1 in 3K resolution is available in the Pocket 3 by simply turning the display screen vertical and hitting continue before it powers off, or you can program it to stay on and just change to the 1:1 vertical format. The vertical display screen is going to make it a lot easier for you to frame your short-form content. Next, we have something that beginning filmmakers and content creators wouldn't even think about getting when they're first starting out, and that's the dreaded gimbal. In filmmaking, a gimbal is the one piece of equipment that most people dread using, but it's the best way to get nice, steady handheld shots with your camera. The downfalls about using a gimbal, other than the size, is having to balance the camera every time you're using it, and it's impossible to not draw attention to yourself when you're out shooting. The Osmo Pocket 3 and the other Pocket series cameras have the camera built right inside the gimbal. Turn the camera on and it's ready to go. No balancing, adjusting the camera, or complicating settings to configure. Like a full-size gimbal, the Pocket 3 gives you the most popular shooting modes with the gimbal like follow, tilt locked, and FPV. Along with the shooting modes offered with the gimbal, you also get a mini joystick and trigger to control the movements of the camera, just like a full-size gimbal. Now with the Pocket 3, you get all the benefits of a large gimbal in one small discrete package. The biggest upgrade to the DJI Osmo Pocket 3 is the highly anticipated 1-inch CMOS sensor. This pretty much puts a cap on how good you can make these tiny fixed aperture cameras. It may not compete with an expensive cinema camera, but it's going to teach you what to look for in the quality of your footage. The 1-inch sensor is going to give you a lot cleaner low-light footage and more dynamic range, providing you more detail on the highlights and shadows. One of the biggest complaints about action cameras and tiny handheld cameras is how terrible the footage looks in low-light situations. The Pocket 3 clearly made the necessary adjustments to be on top in this category. Another feature that the DJI Osmo Pocket 3 has that'll bring your footage to another level is the addition of a flat color profile and the 10-bit D-Log color science. With 10-bit D-Log, you're going to be able to get more detailed color out of your footage and smoother transition in the colors. Of course, this is also going to force you to take your camera out of auto mode and start color correcting in your editing software. That's just 6 of the many reasons this camera is perfect for beginning filmmakers and content creators. I don't think it's going to replace any of the professional full-size cameras, but it's a great alternative if you're just using your phone for videos, and it makes a valuable tool for your outdoor video arsenal. When you do pick up the Pocket 3, or if you already have it, keep watching this video for a complete breakdown of the menu settings and how to use all the features this little camera has to offer. Once you have your Pocket 3 up and running, there's going to be some settings to change to fit your preference for shooting. This is assuming you already activated the Pocket 3 and got it ready for action. Let's start out by turning the camera on and swiping down on the main screen. The first icon here is going to be where your quick sets are stored. We'll definitely come back to this one. The next icon over has the settings for what happens when the screen is rotated. Screen rotate and capture. I keep this off, but you can turn it on if you want the camera to automatically start recording once it's turned on. If you do select this to start recording, then it lists your shooting modes and quick sets to choose from, and it will start shooting in that mode. The next one over is the screen brightness. I keep this all the way up unless I'm going to be in someplace dark and I don't want to draw too much attention. The next one over is FT Selfie. Selecting this will tell the camera to automatically start tracking your face when you're in selfie mode. The next one is the long list of settings, starting with wireless mic. I don't use a wireless mic, but if you're using the DJI wireless mic that comes with the combo, you can find all your settings here for that. Next one down, we have gimbal startup direction, which is just the direction you want the camera facing when you start up the Pocket 3. We can keep this on forward unless most of your content is vlogging, then you can have it face you. Next one down is rotate screen to power off. When you turn to the vertical position, it gives you a timer and shuts down the camera. I keep this off because I like to switch from landscape to vertical a lot, and I can just power off the unit by holding in the record button. Next is selfie flip. This will just mirror you on the other side of the screen in selfie mode in case you want to change your framing on a shot. Next we have OTG connection, so you can connect your Pocket 3 to a tablet or smartphone with a USB-C cable. I don't quite understand the benefit of this unless you're not able to connect to the Mimo app wirelessly. Down to wireless info. This tells you the assigned device name and wireless password. Next we have Wi-Fi frequency. By default this is set on 5.8 gigahertz I believe, so we'll keep it on that. And last we have reset connection. If you're having troubles connecting, then this might help. Next in the settings, we have wearable mode, which will just set the gimbal to POV while we're wearing the Pocket 3 on our backpack strap or some other attachment. Next down, we have gimbal calibration, which isn't a bad idea to do this every once in a while to assure that the gimbal is working correctly. You simply stand the Pocket 3 on a flat surface and click Configure. It takes about 10 seconds tops. Next, we have joystick speed. Here we can adjust the speed of the zoom and how fast the joystick moves the gimbal. I found 2 is a nice smooth speed for this, but you can set it for whatever you want. Next is video compression. Here we can select HEVC, which is H265, and this is newer and more advanced than the H264 that's also offered. HEVC is more efficient and faster to process and edit. Next is sounds coming from the Pocket 3. You can set this to mute if you're in a public place, or low and medium isn't too bad. Next down is grid, and I like to turn this on to help me frame my shots. Next is anti-flicker, which will just keep this set to auto. Then we have time code, which you don't need to worry about unless you're familiar with syncing audio to an external recorder. Next we have naming management. I just kept this to the default naming for now. Next down, screen off when recording. I keep this on never so I can view what I'm recording all the time. Next, auto power off is defaulted to 5 minutes, which is fine. It also gives you a beeping warning when it's starting to power off. Next we have LED on or off. We'll keep this on since it's just one little light. Next is continue last live stream, which keeps track of your live stream footage via the Mimo app. Then we have language, which you can set this to whatever you need. Next down, we have format for your micro SD card. You may need to do this when you first install a new SD card. Next down is your factory reset if you want to get rid of all your settings and start over. Then we have device info, and here you can find the device name and serial number along with the firmware version you're running. And last, we have compliance info, which I've never seen before in a menu, but it tells you all the power ratings, input power, and battery info of the Pocket 3. That's everything in the settings area. Now you can go over to the next icon, which is for your screen orientation. I like to keep this on auto so it's faster to start shooting when switching from landscape to vertical. Next over we have our gimbal rotational speed, which I like to keep on default or slow for smoother footage. Next we have our gimbal modes consisting of follow, which the gimbal is going to move in all directions, tilt locked, which keeps the horizon level while the gimbal moves up and down, and then we have FPV mode where the camera moves freely as you move. And I believe that's about everything in the swipe down menu options. Next we have the swipe up menu, which is going to show you the resolution and frame rates available for the shooting mode that you're in. We're in video mode right now, and you can see we have all the resolutions up to 4K and frame rates up to 60 frames per second. One thing to note is they didn't put 120 frames per second here. You have to select slow mode first, then swipe up and it gives you the option here. When we swipe on the right side of the menu, we get the important choice to make, and that's auto or pro mode. Pro mode is going to allow you to set your shutter speed accordingly to your frame rate using the industry standard double it method. 24 frames per second will get a 1/48 or whatever offered is closest. 60 frames per second will get a shutter speed of 1/120, and 120 frames per second will have a shutter speed of 1/240. If you plan on just shooting in auto, then of course you won't need to worry about any of this. You can still select 4K at whatever frame rate you want, but the camera is going to automatically adjust the shutter speed according to the lighting. When we're in Pro mode, we'll see 3 icons across the top for shutter, mic, and the Pro mode on and off. When we click on shutter, we'll get to change our exposure settings by clicking on exposure first. Here at the top, it has an EV offset if you want to make your footage a little lighter or darker. I keep this on 0 or -0.3 most of the time. Then we have our shutter speed. We'll select 1/50 since we're in 24 frames per second. To the right of that, we have our minimum and maximum ISO settings. I like to keep this set at 50 to 1600. Then we hit confirm and our exposure is ready to go. Next one over is white balance. I set this at 5500 to 5700 when I'm shooting outdoors during the day. Next we have glamour effects, which you can play around with if you do a lot of vlogging or your subject wants to smooth out their skin a little. It actually has a lot of detailed AI features in here to completely change your look. Next over we have color. I like to take advantage of the 10-bit D-Log and do my own color grading, but you can also select normal. The colors coming out of this camera are beautiful, but it looks a little too sharp for me. There's also HLG 10-bit, providing an even broader color scope to work with when editing. Down to focus mode. You'll want to keep this on continuous most of the time, but product showcase mode works great for focusing on an object in front of the scene and blurring out the background. Lastly, we have image adjustment, which lets you fine-tune the sharpness and noise reduction. I have my sharpness set to -2 and noise reduction at 0 for now. Onto our left screen swipe menu. This is going to bring up our display footage. I really like how it tells you your settings for the footage in the bottom left corner. We can tap the dots on the left side and it lets us either trash a file or like it. That's it for this menu. The Mimo app gives you a lot more features and editing capabilities for your files too. Now going back to our quick sets feature that I really like with the DJI cameras. Let's set everything for shooting in 4K 24 frames per second Pro mode, including shutter speed, white balance, ISO, color mode, etc. Now we'll swipe down and go to the first little profile icon. It should say C1 and have a little plus sign. Simply click on this and voila, all your settings are saved for 24 frames per second as C1. Now if you want to pull up your C1 quick set, click on the shooting mode icon in the bottom left corner of the screen and scroll all the way over to the left and there it is. Do this with all your favorite shooting modes and it'll save you a lot of time. Above the shooting mode icon, we have our active track settings, starting with face auto detect. Hit start and the camera will automatically follow the face that's closest to the center of the camera. Next one down is dynamic framing, which allows you to set an area of your frame that you want the subject to be in at all times while it's tracking. The last one is the spin shot. This gives you a really cool spin effect while the subject stays centered in the middle of the screen. If you want to track a subject or object, simply double tap on the subject in the frame. If you want to track yourself, then you can pull up the Mimo app and draw a rectangle around you and it'll start tracking you. In the top left corner, we have our SD card info. The top right corner, we have our battery info. Under that, we have our EV setting. Under that, we have our zoom toggle. Tap on this and it changes the function of the joystick to zoom in and out. Tap again and the joystick controls the gimbal. In the bottom right corner is the gimbal direction. Double tap on this and the camera points forward or into selfie mode. I tried covering a little bit of everything on this camera, but if I missed anything, let me know in the comments below. And as always, consider giving this video a like if I answered any of your questions on the new DJI Osmo Pocket 3. And subscribe so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos on this camera and other new exciting gear to help you shoot better in the great digital outdoors.